Great Lakes State Football.
Episode 17.
The best podcast in the state of Michigan, discussing every level of football. I'm Vince.
Core Dog.
I'm Brett.
And Brett is back from a long, wonderful vacation in the great city of Las Vegas. How you feeling, Brett? A little tired?
A little tired, but I'm still high off that Wolverine win.
I can imagine.
It was a great weekend, though. Great weekend.
How was tournament weekend in Vegas? I've heard it's one of the most fun times to go.
It was really fun because pretty much everywhere you went, if you're watching a game, chances are somebody next to you was a diehard fan for that team. So it was like neck and neck. And not only that, but there's people with big money on the game. Like we were watching the Ohio State game. No, it wasn't the Ohio State game. It was a Michigan game. It was a Michigan-Tennessee game, and this guy leaned over and told my buddy Tom that he had $3,000 on Tennessee.
Oh my gosh.
They ended up losing.
Oh no.
So
people balling out with big money.
Yeah, or just acting like they got it.
Second mortgage on his house.
Yeah,
that's
seriously.
Great. Well, we're not going to be talking about basketball. We're going to be talking about football here. We have a few things before we get to our guest this week. We are very excited to bring a conversation interview with Coach Josh Shattuck, who was just recently hired as the new head football coach at East Grand Rapids High School. He is had quite a bit of coaching experience in his young life. He's not even 40 years old. I think he's like 35 or 36. He's been coaching for 16 years, 13 as a head coach. So we'll be talking with him later in the episode about his coaching career and his decision to come back home. He's originally from Michigan and spent some time coaching in Indiana, coming back to coach at East Grand Rapids High School. So we'll get to that a little bit later. We're going to talk about some news here in the high school ranks in Michigan MHSAA. Have a couple things, D3, D2, and then a few FBS topics. Should be pretty quick here as football is pretty dull this time of year, right? Outside of some hires and some pretty much hires. That's about the only news are hires that we have going on right now. First, speaking of which, the first topic here, we got MHSAA football, Okemos High School in our conference here as us being Grand Ledge grads. Okemos is part of the CWC Blue. Okemos, it's not really a secret, has had a really, really awful stretch of football here, losing 23 straight games, has not had a win since the second week of 2019, has hired the East Lansing grad. He's a 2012 graduate from East Lansing High School, F.A. Scott Umakpour, who actually Brett, Kory, and I all played against when he was at East Lansing. Dude is a stud. He was a wide receiver, was originally committed and attended Ball State to play football. I believe he played there for 2 or 3 seasons. I think he was redshirt as a freshman before he transferred to Saginaw Valley and finished his career playing at Saginaw Valley. He has come back to coach at his alma mater over the last, I think, 4 seasons. He's been an assistant 4 or 5 seasons at East Lansing High School, and he just got hired as Okemos's newest head football coach. He was interviewed by the LSJ and said this was not something he ever anticipated, never thought that he would be turning to coaching, nor did he ever think it would become his full-time job. So he seems to be excited. He said he knows it's a daunting task. He's up for the opportunity. I love that in the LSJ article, he mentioned that with me being 28 years old, I can bring a lot of positive energy, build relationships with kids, especially with my experience playing football and representing the community, being a Lansing guy. So good luck to F.A. I'll be coaching against him this fall. I know he's got a lot of work to do, but a guy like that, I'm sure he is more than up to the challenge. The next little bit of news here, pretty crazy news that just came out, I think, a couple days ago. The CHSL, which we've talked about with a few guests, the Catholic High School League out of Detroit. They are the biggest Catholic sports league in the country. They have 27 teams, 27 schools in the Detroit area that make up this conference for sports. They just announced that they are adding schools from Toledo. The report from the D-Zone and then on their website said they're welcoming 5 schools from the Toledo area. One of them is 2 of them are girls only, 2 of them are boys only, and then 1 is a co-ed school. These 5 schools will not be a part of the league until the 2023-2024 school year. we have talked about on our podcast how the Catholic schools in Detroit have so much trouble, especially the Detroit area, so much trouble scheduling teams. No one wants to play them, especially the biggest conference with Orchard Lake, Brother Rice, De La Salle, Catholic Central, Detroit Catholic Central. They have a hell of a time finding people to play them, often playing teams from Canada, often going to Ohio. Most of these schools are already playing Ohio schools. So for them to partner up with Toledo Catholic schools, I think just makes sense. I don't know if this is going to ruffle feathers. I don't know if you guys have seen anyone sharing opinions on this yet. It's pretty new news. I don't know. I don't have an attachment to this league personally. So to me, I think it makes sense.
There's been some excitement on Twitter about it. It looks like people are like pretty pumped about it. So it'll be awesome. Good football, good sports in general. Great opportunity for the kids in those schools, and moving forward, it gives them, I mean, if you go down to Ohio to play, you're getting a little bit different exposure than playing in Detroit. So I think it's good.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kory. Playing in a whole different state gives you another state of exposure. And I mean, it is Toledo, but those schools are going to be playing other schools from the state of Ohio. So if a guy is watching tape, or a college coach is watching tape on some dude, he might happen to see you. And but I think the only feathers it's going to ruffle is the MHSAA, because just the way the MHSAA seems to run their ship is very tight, and they don't like a lot of change. At least that's from my perspective, what I see going on. And it's going to be interesting to see how in football the playoff points will be adjusted. I don't know if I know some schools in the UP play schools from Wisconsin, and there's been some Michigan teams that played schools from Indiana, like Detroit King played Carmel last year.
Yep.
I'm not sure how the playoff point system works for that, though.
So I saw, this is unofficial, I just saw this on Twitter, an exchange with the D Zone, that supposedly they are going to count as D3 schools in football.
Right, but won't there, in
terms of points?
Yeah, but the points will also be a resultant of how good the team is, right? I mean, so
you're saying in terms of if they're winning games or not, the multipliers.
Yeah, and then you have to know who the teams from Ohio, like how good their schedule is compared to the teams in Michigan. I mean, seems like there's a lot of variables. Yeah,
you're right. No, they had to have already had something set up though, because we already have, like we just mentioned, and Detroit King, great example, was already playing a school last year with the new format. So I'm sure that the MHSAA already had a system in place for cross-state opponents.
Yeah, they have to have something in place. I mean,
because there's already teams that are playing out of state.
There's probably 5 to 10 games a year against out of state.
Oh, it may probably close to double that, I would guess.
Yeah,
total for sure.
Yeah, I'll fact check that, and we can announce it at the end what the result is. But yeah, I was just curious.
Oh, so yeah, see if you can find some. I'd be curious if they've announced that yet or on their website or something. Moving on, the last little thing here with MHSAA news, regional rankings from us. We've been putting out regional rankings from around the state of Michigan for high school football teams over the last month and a half. We've put out rankings of the Lansing area, Grand Rapids area, Flint area, Tri-City Flint area, as well as the Upper Peninsula. And all of those rankings are by win percentage since 2010. We did another poll and people voted, and we are now going to do Northern Michigan of the Lower Peninsula. So pretty much everything north of the Grand Rapids, Lansing, Tri-City line, everything up above those greater areas and south of the bridge will be included in that next one. So you'll have the Traverse City schools, Mount Pleasant, Midland, and some of the other far north schools included in that list. So look for that to come out hopefully within the next week here before we do our next episode.
Also, really quick, freshly from the D Zone, Clarkson has hired Justin Pintar as their new head coach. Previously served as the O-line coach
30 minutes ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Previously served as the O-line coach and takes over after Kurt Richardson retired after 35 seasons. So they kept it in-house, which is good to see considering they've had a great program for a while now. So,
yeah, Clarkson's had a lot of success. Absolutely. That's you see that sustained success. You got a guy there for 35 years. He's not going anywhere if he's going to keep winning games. So I'm sure that was probably just he's got to be, I would imagine, in his 70s if he's been doing it for 35 years, at least 60s. So good for him. Good luck to Clarkson's new head coach.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, absolutely. That is just like our guest who we're going to talk about a little bit later here. Big shoes to fill in East Grand Rapids. Division III football, one little bit of news from the MIAA. Olivet just announced a day ago, I think it was yesterday, that they hired a new wide receivers coach, Kory Ringer, who actually was recently coaching at Everett, who is in the conference that I coach in here in Lansing, the CWC Blue. Kory Ringer played for Tony Annese, a guy we've talked about quite a bit, back when Tony was at GRCC. In GRCC's last season or two, I think 2010, 2011, I saw in his bio, he played for Annese at GRCC. I think 2011 was the last season of the program, right? If I remember correctly. So in his last 2 years, he played there. And then when the program folded and actually you can only play 2 years of JUCO anyway, he went with Tony to Ferris State. He played for Annese in Annese's first 2 seasons at Ferris State in 2012, 2013. I saw that Kory bounced around to a few different minor league teams. I wasn't familiar with the names, so I'm not sure if they were arena football or if they were just some other league. But he continued his playing career a little bit after college, just not in the NFL. And then he's been coaching ever since. He coached at Fruitport. He coached at Jenison. And he's been at Everett the last couple of years as a running backs coach, I believe. And they just hired him at Olivet College. So Kory Ringer, good luck at Olivet. D2 news, just one couple things here about Ferris State. Ferris State just announced their official schedule for 2022. Pretty crazy schedule. They have 4 playoff opponents from the 2021 season on this schedule. Grand Valley, Findlay, Lenore-Rhine, and I believe Central Washington are the 4 teams on this schedule that were in the playoffs last year. They're only playing 10 games. They've done 10 games for a few years now with a bye week. September 17th is their bye weekend right now. They don't have a game scheduled that weekend. They have 2 non-conference games before that bye week against Central Washington and Lenore-Rhine. So they'll open up with 2 former playoff teams from the season before, 2 tough games. And then they play Waldorf at home. They're at Findlay, who is out of the GMAC, former GLIAC school, and then they're into their 6-game GLIAC schedule. This will be the first year that the GLIAC will only have a 6-game conference schedule. So the conference champ just has to beat 6 teams, or maybe even go 5-1. I don't know if they beat, Grand Valley and Ferris have pretty much dominated the conference now for the better part of the 21st century. So be interesting to see if they can run it back.
Like we talked about prior to the show, Vince, I believe that they still make the playoffs going 8-2, just with the
how tough a schedule.
I mean, in prior years that wouldn't work. You go 8-2, you don't make the playoffs in the GLIAC. Potentially, I guess I should say.
Yeah, Hillsdale, my freshman year, went 8-3, won the GLIAC championship and didn't make the playoffs. So the GLIAC can be a bitch if everyone's beating each other up, but they haven't really beaten each other up in a while. It's pretty much been Ferris and Grand Valley for the last few years here, 4 or 5 years.
Well, with only 7 teams now, the most losses you can have is 6 in the GLIAC.
0-6. That's true. You could go 4. You could finish last in the GLIAC and still win 4 games or 5 games.
6 wins will win you the GLIAC.
Yeah. You could go 6-4 and win the GLIAC. So yeah, interesting with such a small conference. We've talked about it last week with Kobe. I'll be curious to see what happens with the GLIAC going forward. Last bit of news here with Ferris State. They just tweeted out today. They officially got their plaques from the NCAA declaring them statistical champions in 2 categories from this season. They were the D2 leader in points per game, 47.2 points per game. And they were the D2 leader in total yards per game, almost 512 yards of offense per game. That's just, that's absurd.
Playing with 2 different quarterbacks, splitting the season, and an offensive line that was subbing 5 in, 5 out.
Utterly absurd.
Hey, it keeps everybody fresh.
Fresh legs, baby. They got fresh legs.
Brett, you want to continue our trend of you taking over for FBS here?
Yeah, I can do that. Sorry, I've been in the shadows the last couple segments. Reason being is I found the answer to our question about the playoff points for MHSAA.
Okay.
So it was just along the same lines that you had said. Essentially, that out-of-state school is placed into a division based on their enrollment. So if they're Division I school, essentially you'd get 60 points if you beat them. And then there's some multipliers that happen too based on the out-of-state opponent's wins and losses, but it doesn't take into account the strength of the other school's schedule, if that makes sense. So
yeah, because that would be really hard, I feel like.
Yeah, it would be very hard. So they did keep it fairly simple, but yeah, you are based off of the size of the other school.
Yep.
So with that, moving on to the FBS for the MAC, Central Michigan up in the Pleasy, they announced the signing of 3 new coaches, one of which we mentioned a while back, Tom Mason. He's going to be a linebackers coach, has a great mustache. Kind of reminds me of Don Brown on the outside. He hails from SMU, where he held the same position. I think he actually had some ties with Coach McElwain back in the day at Colorado State. But don't quote me on that one. And then Paul Petrino, who's here to coach be the offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach. Central lost their previous offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach to Appalachian State. And then William Velachos, offensive line. Ryan McNamara, general manager, and Chris Calley, the recruiting coordinator. And then also some news in Mount Pleasant. Tavita Thompson has been promoted to the passing game coordinator and tight ends coach after being the tackles and tight ends coach last year. So it's an interesting move going from the passing game coordinator to now the tackles and tight ends coach. Kind of makes a little bit more sense, though. Tackles and tight ends seem to spend a little bit more time together, depending on which offense you run. But like Vince said, not a whole lot of news outside of coaching hires. A lot of these coaching hires had happened in the last month or two, but they were just announced formally this week. Moving down to Kalamazoo, offensive lineman Eliza Anderson has committed to Western Michigan this month. He is the second transfer that has won a national championship in the previous year, although he is coming from Sam Houston State, where he started 9 games at left tackle during the Bearcats FCS national championship season in 2020. He had more than 20 scholarship offers from schools after entering the transfer portal.
Wow.
That is an impressive statement because there's thousands of people in the transfer portal and a lot of guys maybe only get contact from 1 or 2 schools.
Yeah.
So with all those offers, it's interesting. He ended up at Western. In Ypsilanti, the field is still gray along with the sky. Not a whole lot of interesting news in Ypsilanti. The coolest thing about Ypsilanti is it's close to Ann Arbor. And moving a little bit west to Ann Arbor, we have David Ojabo, projected top 20 pick, tore his Achilles at the Pro Day. I don't know if any of you have seen the video of this. I know Hurdles put it out on Instagram, but I mean, he was absolutely crushing the drill. And then as it happens when you tear your Achilles, it looks like he gets shot with a shotgun.
Ugh.
And he ended up falling over. But the dude that was running the drill just completely ignored him and went over and just picked up the ball and walked away. Like he didn't even acknowledge the fact that he was on the ground hurting. I don't know if he thought he was just acting up, but I've recommended you check out the video. The guy looks like a complete dick.
The scouts didn't move either.
Yeah, no one moved, and he's just laying there in pain. He just tore his Achilles.
He's probably yelling too.
Yeah, it has to be one of the most painful injuries.
That's awful. That sucks.
So that's about it in Ann Arbor. Nothing new in East Lansing. With that, we'll head over to Kory with the professional teams.
Yeah, so bringing in the Detroit Lions news with the draft very close. The Lions did officially re-sign both of their backup QBs, Tim Boyle and David Blow. As you can remember, Boyle is who we brought over, who has the big arm. He actually got some showtime this year, and I personally did not think he was that bad. Everybody else, of course, how terrible. Well, he's a backup quarterback in the NFL, folks. I don't really know what you want from him. Go look at the history. They normally are never very good. But with that being said, looking at the NFL draft coming up in a few weeks, with us re-signing both of them, I don't see us drafting a quarterback, especially not in the first 4 or 5 rounds, maybe rounds 5, 6 in that range, potentially just a development guy, but I don't foresee it. It still looks like Aiden Hutchinson's the guy, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Kyle Hamilton is saying rising up boards quick, the safety out of Notre Dame. So we will see what happens. Other than that, not a whole lot of news. They did I don't know if you guys saw when they had DJ Chark in the house, they interviewed him and they said, what is one thing? I don't know if you guys have seen the interview. We'll attach it to the podcast. But what is one thing you would tell your teammates and fans about yourself that you are like most proud of or that people wouldn't know? And he said something along the lines of, I got the drip.
Oh, I think I saw that. Or did you text us? I think maybe you texted me that. I saw it somewhere. I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, I think I heard of it. Maybe sent it this weekend. I wasn't paying attention, but what an absolutely hilarious but confident answer.
Come on, man. Like, out of anything that you could share, like, I'm a family man, I'm hardworking. No, I got the drip. I got the swag. It was something along those lines. We'll attach it to the podcast and embed it in here, but it was hilarious.
That's my why.
That is all I have that's all I got for the Lions.
Although I did hear that it's funny, it's not going to happen, but with Deshaun Watson going to the Browns, everyone's saying that there's rumors that Baker would come to the Lions, which I don't know how I feel about that, but it's interesting that of all the teams that pick the Lions, who essentially have a Baker Mayfield, an unathletic Baker Mayfield at quarterback.
If you watch the Lions versus Browns game this season and you want Baker Mayfield and Honolulu Blue, you should be shot.
I don't know. Baker's talented. I can't take it away from him, but he's had flashes of glory, but then he has some terrible games too. But part of that might just be what it's like to play for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, but don't come to Detroit if you got that, because it's even worse in Detroit.
An 8th grade Dario Bongiorni has a better arm than Baker Mayfield.
People are listening right now like, what the hell are you talking about?
It's not delivery, it's Bongiorni.
The only other thing I would add is Michigan Panthers football kicks off in less than a month, April 17th. It's coming up. So that's exciting. I hope that league does well. We'll see what happens though. So shouldn't get our hopes up. All right. With that, we are going to move on to the second part of our podcast here with our guest for the week for episode 17, Coach Shattuck, coming from Elkhart, Indiana, moving up to coach at East Grand Rapids High School, returning to his home state where he's originally from. Not originally from East Grand Rapids, he's originally from Spring Lake, but we're going to have him on, have a discussion with him about him taking over the reins of one of the most storied programs in Michigan high school history. Stay on afterwards for Brett's recommendation of the week. Hope you enjoy. I'm going to go ahead and segue into the second part of the podcast here with our guest for episode 17. Very excited to have on with us tonight Josh Shattuck. Coach Shattuck is a 2004 Spring Lake grad, 3-sport athlete at Spring Lake High School, 2008 Alma College grad where he actually played basketball, 16 total years as a head football as a high school football coach, and 13 years as a head coach at 4 different schools, with East Grand Rapids being his 5th. And he was recently hired there. Coach Shattuck, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm doing great. Thanks. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we were actually a few weeks, or I think it was a week or two right before they announced that you were hired. We were speculating. There were some rumors flying around on the internet who was going to get that job. There were several GLIAC football players, former guys. I know someone threw out Jared Valdir as a name for a possible hire, which I think he's been actually working in the East Grand Rapids community as he's been working in their cafeteria, if I remember correctly. Cooking for them. So
is that GRCC, I think,
or is it GRCC? I couldn't remember. It's one of those nice Grand Rapids schools. I couldn't remember which one it was. So Coach, we wanted to kind of talk to you about a few different topics here. First of which, you spent 4 years at Gladwin before you moved down to Indiana, being hired up in Gladwin, Michigan at 23 years old back in 2009. Do you mind kind of talking about that experience? You had obviously 3 years of coaching experience as an assistant at Breckenridge while you were playing basketball at Alma College. But what was that experience like, fresh out of college, 23 years old, being the head varsity football coach?
Well, it was an interesting situation. Obviously, looking back on it, I mean, crazy time. So I was a student teacher. So getting back into Breckenridge, I had one of our college basketball coaches I played during the week. So we spent a lot of time together talking about football on those bus rides to and from college basketball games. So he offered me a spot on their staff as like a 19-year-old, and I just fell in love with coaching football. I mean, just fell in love with it immediately. So 2008, I did my student teaching. He was no longer there. Mark Gregory was the head coach at the time. And I was a unique grad where I was a mid-year grad. So I graduated in December. I technically walked in like May or April of 2008, but I had to finish out my student teaching. So we have the season and then I finish out early December and I'm just kind of like stuck in no man's land, right? I mean, hard to get a teaching job in December, right?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I was just looking for anything and I was probably about a month away from doing the job fair thing. And at the time it was very popular to like go to South Carolina, Arizona, Florida for young teachers because there was such a surplus in Michigan. It's just hard to get a job at the time.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was getting resumes ready and I applied. I remember I applied at a place called Britton Deerfield in Southeast Michigan, and their athletic director, who was their former head football coach, called me and said, I'll never forget this. He said, and I wish I could remember his name because it meant a lot to me at the time, but he told me, Josh, he's like, I would hire you right now. The effort you put into your resume and like the packet that you sent is exactly what we're looking for. He said, we just don't have a teaching job and there's just no way to get you down here. But he said, keep your head up because you're going to get one of these jobs. If you're applying, you're going to get one. And I just thought, what awesome feedback. So, lo and behold, about 2 weeks later, Gladwin called. It was the biggest school I applied at. And the long and the short of it was I was exactly what they were looking for because I didn't need a teaching job at the time. I was willing to sub at that point, like January, March. And I just knew if I, went over their hearts and minds, especially the community during those first 5 or 6 months, that I would be in good shape to probably get the first available teaching job. And that's exactly what happened. So very unique experience. I was 22 when I applied, 20
Wow.
at the time I was coaching the season. But yeah, and the funny part about that is I actually had to finish a couple of classes to turn my minor into a major. So I was living in my brother's dorm at Grand Valley, taking 2 classes in Allendale and driving up to Gladwin as
Oh my.
Oh no.
it was a unique time in my life. So it was, it was unique. So I was in Gladwin for 4 years and that's where all of it started.
Were you just trying to apply to any schools that, were relatively in the region that you were looking at? Was there any specific reason Gladwin, or you just anywhere that would hire you?
Well, kind of funny you say that. So I was pretty self-aware. Full disclosure, my last year in Breckenridge, we were 0-9 and the head coach got let go. So
oh man,
an assistant at an 0-9 school with 200 kids whose coach gets let go probably isn't at the top of any candidate.
We really want you.
Yeah, exactly. So I was trying, honestly. I knew that my stuff was good. It was organized. It was detailed. I spent a lot of time putting my packet together. And my goal was to just get some of that feedback. And honestly, it was to land a teaching job because I thought, some of those places, they're not going to hire me. But maybe when the new coach comes in, they say, hey, like there's this guy who might be a good assistant. Yep. I had 3 years of, 2 years of varsity coordinating experience at that time while I was in college. So, albeit it was a small school and everything, but it was, it's valuable experience. So, yep. It was one of those things. Funny story about that too. I go on. I haven't thought about these things in a long time. I actually almost didn't apply because that was by far the biggest school that I would even I wasn't wasting my time at big schools. And Gladwin at the time, in my mind, that school was 600 kids. Division
yep.
5, and I was applying at the Division 8s, the Division 7s, and things like that. So I almost didn't apply. A buddy of mine from college, was from Gladwin, and his dad said, yeah, this is like a wide open job. And so I didn't really have an inside connection there. I just knew a little bit about the position, and I applied, and all the things just kind of came together.
So wait, so you said you were applying at these schools, for the head coaching job, but not necessarily anticipating getting it. So that was the situation with Gladwin too, is you did apply for their head coaching job and thought, oh, maybe they'll hire me as a teacher. And then when they got back to you and said, hey, you want to be our next head football coach, or did they bring you in for an interview? How'd that go?
Yeah. So there's a lot of luck involved in this. And
yeah,
ego can definitely handle this, especially looking back, like how does a 22-year-old at the time get hired off of the background we had in football at Breckenridge at that time? So a couple things happened. They got my resume, and the principal, and I found this out all after was hired in there, but the principal got the packet, and the first thing they said was that there is no way that we can hire a 22-year-old, first of all, but this guy put a lot of work in, and this guy might be a good assistant coach. And if we ever have a teaching job, like put this in the file, because if we have a social studies job, like let's call this guy, like this guy cares.
Yep.
You know? And that's really like when I was doing it, I put a lot of work into it, because again, at the time it was hard to get a teaching job, really hard.
Yeah.
I
remember people getting let go. I remember teachers getting let go at that time.
Pink slipped. Yeah. So I was using that as kind of, I wanted to be a head coach, but it was really like, hey, I'm organized and maybe I stand out in the teaching part of things. So they put me in the no pile, but the principal kept it on file. And so they went through their process and they had their candidates, and they went through, I think their board basically required them to interview a minimum number of people. Okay. And so they had their guy, and it was a gentleman who was in Florida. I don't know who it is. I don't know any of the story about him. I think he was originally from Michigan. He was in Florida at the time, and he was kind of like their guy. They're like on paper and through phone interviews, things like that. Like, this is our guy.
Wow.
He canceled his interview like a day or two before it was scheduled. And so they weren't necessarily thrilled with or ready to hire one of the other guys. They'd already gone through their process at this point. And they went back, and the principal said, the exact words the athletic director told me at the time was, the principal said, screw it. Board says we got to bring someone in. Let's bring that young guy in. He had the best, bring him in. So I went up
awesome.
there. I went up there for an interview. This job was posted like early November, right? They had gone through their whole process and kind of were stuck in limbo. And I go up there, it was like after Christmas, before New Year's. So like the 28th, 29th, something like that in December. And there was a basketball game going on. And I interviewed what was supposed to be about an hour, and it went about 3 hours, and it was just great. Now, I didn't know it was great at the time. I'm just like, they're asking questions. It seems to be going well. I don't know. I've never been in one of these before.
You're probably just like, man, he's supposed to be 3 hours long.
Yeah. And so the committee was like 6 or 7 people, and they were looking at it. And now I recollect, like they were looking at each other with like these pauses, and they were kind of making eye contact with one another. And I was like, I don't know, like, did I offend somebody or whatever? And so what happened was the athletic director was over. I shook everybody's hand. The AD says, hey, she goes, we're going to debrief, but why don't you go watch the basketball game? I'd love to kind of talk to you after for a little bit. And I was like, okay. So I sat and watched the basketball game. About 20 minutes later, she brought me back into the office, and she goes, Josh, she's like, everything that happened in our process makes sense, and it's led us to you being here right now, and we are going to offer you the job right now. And
wow.
Whatever was said in there, just it all clicked with what they were looking for. And I was willing to do it without knowing exactly how much money I was going to make and exactly all the things I couldn't do now. Right. I accepted the job without knowing a thing about benefits, job.
Oh, yeah.
You were 22.
Yeah.
I'm 22. I'm like,
we're 30 and we're still learning about some of that stuff.
So I'm like, I'll sub, I remember calling my dad, and my dad's pretty conservative, like financially. And I was like, Dad, they offered me the job. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah. No teaching job, and I don't really know any details. And I remember when he was like, well, you got to take that job. I remember when he said that, I was like, okay, like this is an opportunity that, and obviously hindsight's, 2020, but looking at it now, it's like without taking that gamble, I guess financially, like I didn't have a job. I didn't have income. So I took it. It was what they were looking for. I could take it mid-year so I could be active head coach. Like I said, I was in Allendale taking like just 2 classes in Grand Valley to, finish up a degree thing at Elma, and driving back and forth, 23 years old. Crazy. Yeah. Would never be able to do that now.
I was going to say the kind of stuff looking back more than 10 years later, like, hell no, I would not be doing that now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was great though. It was awesome.
Well, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. You spent 4 years there, and by the time, your final season rolls around, you end up taking Gladwin to only their second playoff game in 9 years. And I think they had you guys had your first home playoff game there in 10 years. The 2012 season, I think, is what I saw, was the last time they had a home playoff game before your final season there. So you did manage to, even at, 23 to 26 years old, found some success, and, at a school that wasn't necessarily bad, but wasn't really winning a ton of games. And then you end up going down to Indiana, which is maybe not a crazy adjustment from Gladwin, small school, but Elkhart, Indiana, to my knowledge, is not like a huge city. What was the thought process, or excuse me, you went to Seymour first. What was your thought process first when you went to going to Seymour down in Indiana?
Well, what happened was pretty simple. And that's when kind of life hits you. Is I met my wife in grad school. So we went to a master's program for athletic administration. And it was one of those, it was in person, like cohort every other weekend, all weekend type deals. And so we end up getting married, engaged, whatever. We started dating, I think my third year in Gladwin. So 2011. Mm-hmm. And, we finish up our master's program. And there was one night I will not forget that she came home, and we were living together at the time. Well, we were married then. So 2012, and she came home and was just really frustrated, and she was going to go the next day and start trying to find a job at a bar, like being a bartender. Yep. And it was like, I'm not trying to be controversial here, but like we're 25, 26, we're kind of ready to get our life started. And we have, she has a master's in athletic administration. She's going to go try to be a bartender. It's like, we probably try to go somewhere where we can find something else. Yeah. To use our education for her. And, I had a great job. I was happy. We kind of had it rolling there. I mean, we weren't, blowing the water out of anything, but we felt really like I was at that point really confident in where the program was and where we were heading. And not only my own abilities, but our coaching staff was settled in. Like, people aren't leaving Gladwin, people who are there stay. So we had to start looking, and you guys are going to laugh about this. I literally was just on Football Scoop every day, just looking. And I'm a geography nerd. Like, that's my kind of my wheelhouse. I love looking at maps. So I like looking at Football Scoop just to check out new places, So I click, Seymour, Indiana, and it takes me to their website. Well, they had done this weird video. I say weird, this really cool video where they followed the students around through this, it's kind of like a flash mob type thing. And they went through all their facilities, and they went to the gym. In this gym, in my mind, I'm like, that is the biggest gymnasium I've ever seen. Like, that cannot, why do they have an NBA arena as their gym? So I look it up, lo and behold, it's the largest high school gym in the United States. Or the largest. I'm like, it seats almost 10,000 people. What? Right? It's one of those huge, it's unreal.
Gosh. Indiana basketball.
Yeah. So I look it up, and it's 50 miles north of Louisville, Kentucky. So you're way down there.
Yeah.
Oh, it's way south.
Way south. Way south. So it was about 7.5 hours from Gladwin. I apply again, kind of like, I don't know anybody. I don't know anyone down there. And they call, and they're like, we'd like to set up an interview. We can definitely do this online. At the time, like, I think it was Skype, right? This was before all what we're doing right now, right? So, and I was like, no, I can come down there. And they were very impressed that I was willing to do that. And so I went down there, and I thought I had a great interview. There was like a 10-person committee, and, everyone down there was like, they sound like they're from Alabama compared to, and so, and I mean that respectfully, it was just a culture change, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
On the planet, nicest people you'll ever find. So interview, get called back for a second interview. And, my dad goes with me, not into the interview. He travels with me, and it was a horrible, like, snowstorm, ice storm, stuff that we're used to in Michigan. Well, down there, they don't get much of that. And funny story, I gotta be careful who hears this, but the two other finalists for the second interview, they both lived within 45 minutes of there, and they canceled due to weather. And I drove 7.5 hours in an ice storm.
One way.
Yeah. And so I made an impression on them that I didn't do in my mind. Just going to, like, it's not an option to not go to this interview. And so felt really good about that. And lo and behold, got offered the position, and we moved down there. And that was a big school, about 15, they're about 1,600 kids right now. And so it was a big school. They'd be, a Division I school. Yep. And that was, the way they operate in Indiana was very different from what I was used to in a good way. They really kind of glorify their head coaches. It's a big deal, and your teaching schedule is limited, which I had never heard of before. I mean, in Gladwin, I was teaching full time, and kind of football was like a true extra, like it's just something you do after school. And in Indiana, I have found, especially down there, well, everywhere really, head coaches, specifically boys and girls basketball and football, are usually on some form of a limited schedule. And so I was like, what? I was so uncomfortable. Like, I had an extra prep, which we were on block schedule. So I had an extra 90 minutes every day to do football. And I remember asking my principal, I'm like, so we had 5 elementaries down there. And I remember saying, so I can use that time, just making sure so I don't get in trouble, to like go drop off flyers or build relationships at the middle school and stuff. And he looked at me, he's like, you better. Whoa, I'm in heaven here. And so we go down there. Here I am. I'm 26 at the time, maybe 27. And I think I'm this hot shot. I remember thinking, like, this is big time. I mean, we got this huge gym, beautiful football stadium. You have your own office. I mean, everything's just, this is awesome. I'm big time. And I stepped on the field the first day and I was like, uh-oh, we are in big trouble. We are not very good. And our numbers it wasn't very good. And so we actually lost our first 16 games there. But I was so happy because the life was really good and I was allowed to build it. And so we won an incremental number of games there for 4 years. And that was an unreal experience. Honest to this day, I did not think we were going to leave that place. I thought that's where we would be. Again, crazy to think that now, but I thought that's where we were going to be.
Yeah. So for anyone who's not aware, Coach Shattuck's numbers here at Seymour, you improved every single year with the best record in 11 years. Your final year there, 8-4, going to back-to-back sectional games, which for people from Michigan, that's the equivalent of like a district championship is a sectional. And then in Indiana, they also play 10-game regular seasons. Correct, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
is that Ohio? Or that's Ohio.
It's still 9. Yeah, it's still 9 in Indiana. Yep.
And then you also, like you mentioned, the numbers. I saw that you went from the 40s your first year there. You had about 40 kids in the program to almost 90 by the time you finished up. So that, to me, that's probably your one of your bigger accomplishments. Bringing
it's funny.
Numbers up.
My quarterback from that time, his name's Alan Perry. COVID kind of screwed everything up, but he's like a 4th-year junior at Cedarville University or University of Cedarville. It's a D2 school in Ohio. Yep. It's a baseball player. He reached out the other day and was, congratulating me on this new position at EGR. And we were kind of reminiscing. And, what's really unique about Seymour is when I got there, we had 6 seniors. My first year, a school with 1,500 students. We had 6 that played varsity played football, and we had 9 juniors and 8 sophomores. So it was what I think is at 23, whatever that is, 22 or 23 total players in 10th, 11th, 12th grade put together. And then we had 23 freshmen. So it was 46 players is what we had, if my mind serves me right. If my memory serves me right. So we went from 46. And so what happened was we started like 5 or 6 freshmen, and they like, when I say they weren't good, that's nothing against them. I mean, they weren't elite for freshmen. They should have been solid freshman football players. And I will never forget our week 2 game. We played Jeffersonville, which is a big 6A school down in Louisville on the Indiana side, right across the river there. And they're about 2,100 kids, 2,200 kids. We almost had to cancel the game because our AD was like, this is unsafe. Unsafe for our kids. And so we played the game, which meant a lot to our community and our kids. And, we weren't even close to being competitive through about 15, 16 games. But when it turned, it turned fast. And so what happened was, I was joking with Alan, we were kind of like a college team in the sense that we had the same team for 4 years. Like we don't get me wrong. The kids that played and stuck it out, like I love those kids to death, but we just, by volume, we had 3 straight years of basically bringing everybody back. You lose 6 or 7 guys. I mean, out of a whole team, 2 or 3 starters per year. And so that last year we won 8 games in a row, actually. And it was like, these guys are they've they've started 45 varsity football games. And it's unbelievable. There were 6 or 7 kids that played 45 football games, varsity.
It's like unheard of.
It's
like
unheard
it
of.
Happen. Yeah.
Yeah. In what would be Class A, like Division I football in Michigan.
Never in Division I. Yeah, never.
Yeah.
I mean, rarely do you have freshmen on varsity at Division I high school.
I think James Jackson set the record at Grand Ledge, Vince, when we were there, and it was like 43 games.
Yeah.
And he
rare.
went to
It doesn't
Ohio
happen.
State.
It's a great college career.
Yeah.
That's a great
No,
college
it is.
career.
It is. It was incredible. What an experience too, because, we didn't have it was a unique, what it took to win games there. And I don't mean this as a pat on my back. I mean, like for the kids was like our big motto down there was no bad days. Like we cannot, like it's February 3rd and it's freezing and no one, like we got to be on it today because, and I know that that's not unique. I'm not saying that other people are like just sleeping in, but like the sense of urgency was just nonstop all the time because we didn't have in 4 years there, we did not have a single NAIA or Division II scholarship football player. So to win, I mean, can you imagine, think about that in Michigan terms, a Class A school winning 8 games without a single NAIA or Division II scholarship?
No scholarship guys. Yeah.
None. Yeah.
Doesn't usually happen.
So we had a unique level of cohesion. We had a very, very special player at quarterback, and not just athletically. He was more just like kind of a surgeon out there in what he was capable of mentally, more than physically. And everything just hit. We stayed healthy. And that was that 2016 year when we won 8 games in a row. I mean, our community, it was awesome. It was awesome. Very gratifying. So.
I can't imagine that feeling that season to have that success after the journey right after where you came from, where you started, to see that pay off for those kids, the feeling to see those kids, I'm sure guys who were there that first year too, it probably meant a lot to those guys who stuck it out for 4 years. Yeah.
It meant, a special place. We'll never forget any of those kids, especially that first group. I mean, those poor kids, what do you do? You got 6 seniors. You're playing teams that have 35 seniors. It's just,
you just look them in the eyes, say time
it's
to
so
get to
hard
work.
to show up every day.
Yeah.
To show up every day when you just know it's not going to be competitive or even worth it.
Yeah. And they did, and we did preach that. And I told them, I said, guys, like, we know see, like sometimes you could say, well, that's loser talk to say like, hey, we kind of know the result. This was beyond, right? Like, it's 40-0 at halftime every game, like 50-0, 65-0. Like you can't do anything about it. We didn't have numbers or, we just didn't have it. Right. And so we told the seniors and even the juniors, it was like, hey, when you look back on this thing, believe me, if you're here and like, I'm not going to forget you, our coaches, like you guys are getting this started. And one day you're going to look back and be really proud of what you accomplish. And you'll look at the team being successful, and I hope you feel a part of that success. And that was very true.
That you were the group that stuck it out. You didn't quit. You didn't give up. Yep.
Correct. Yep.
So you had mentioned before we got to Seymour there that you originally imagined never leaving, or looking back, it didn't seem like a place you would ever leave, but you end up going to Elkhart, which I misspoke a little bit earlier. That's the first location, but their second destination in Indiana at Elkhart for 5 seasons, with 3 seasons at Elkhart Central before Elkhart Memorial and Elkhart Central consolidated into just Elkhart High School, your last 2 years there. You want to talk about why the transition to a second school there in Indiana?
Yeah. So my college basketball coach, Terry Smith, Terry Smith was the head coach at Grand Valley for a while. Like when I was in high school, I think his last year as the head coach at Grand Valley basketball was maybe my senior year or the year after my senior year. Anyway, long and the short of it is my senior year in college was Coach Smith's first year at Elma. So I had a new coach my senior year. I was a captain, had a great relationship with him. Mm-hmm. He was, his path was kind of unique, but he ended up as the head basketball coach at Elkhart Central. And so him and I had stayed in touch, and it was probably like February, I want to say, and their football position was open. And so Coach Smith called me. He said, hey, our football job's open. You have any interest in, getting back close to Michigan? We're right on the state line. I live 4 miles south of the state line.
Yep.
And I was like, we're good. We're good. And, we had gone from, like you had said, 46 players to whatever 95, but we were expecting to have about 110, 112 in 2017 in Seymour.
Wow.
Looking at, I mean, well over twice as many as we started with. Sweat equity. We were happy. We loved our house. We loved the setting. I loved my job. My wife had a great job. But we had our daughter when we were in Seymour. And so she was like 2 at the time, just turned 2, January of that year. And I was good. And then he called me back maybe 3 weeks later and said, hey, like, our principal would really like to talk to you. Would you take a call from him? And I said, I mean, sure. I love Coach Smith. He obviously is calling me because he wants this, maybe helps him out in some way if I just take this call. So I talked to the principal. His name is Frank Surge. And he's like, why don't you just come up here? He's like, you don't need to apply. Come up here, hang out with your old coach, watch a basketball game. I'll show you around. Just come up here and visit. So I was like, you know what? That'd be great. I owed him one. Coach Smith came down and spoke to our kids down in Seymour one day. So I was like, I owe him one. So I go up there, I speak to his basketball team, kind of give him a little speech before a big game or big practice before the big game, and then got shown around. And you pull into Elkhart and the stadium is massive. Like, it's one of those big, it's like Hackley. The home side is exactly like Hackley and Muskegon, just this big old concrete, huge, 20 yards wide. And you're like, dang, was not expecting that. You know, they were 2-8 the 2 years before that. They were struggled. They had a 0-win season a few years before that. They just hadn't been, winning a lot of games. Honestly, wasn't very interested. And then got shown around. I was like, okay, this is good. So I was like, you know what? It's closer to home. I'm going to interview. I just don't see it happening. So I go through this process. By the way, their athletic director had stepped away, so they didn't have an AD during their interview process. And their assistant athetic director was retiring at the end of the year. So she was.
I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at this like, there is no way. There's no way. Like, this is not happening. At that time, I had no real desire to go into athletic administration. We were rolling and seeing. I love my day. Everything was good. Right. Well, the athletic director in the middle of the process, who's my athletic director today, which will kind of gives the story away, he decided to come back. And I just fell in love with him. Like, he was awesome. Football guy. He played at Hillsdale.
Go Chargers.
He was on the 85 team. I believe was he on that team? I believe.
Yeah. The national championship team.
He was the head baseball coach I believe he was the head baseball coach at one point at Hillsdale as well.
Oh, wow.
After that. Yeah, he was young. But anyway, so I fell in love with him, and it became obvious that there were a lot of positives. And then they offered me, like, out of the blue, that I went through 3 rounds of interviews. The last one was with the principal and the superintendent. And then the director of HR called and offered me the assistant athletic director job out of the blue. No one talked to me about it. It wasn't like it came out of nowhere. And that came with obviously some benefits for my family and I. And it literally was, I was in the driveway of our daycare lady's place. And I almost ran through I was like, we're moving. We are moving. It was just one of those things. You have to do it, right? You're way closer to home. And then financially it was, and that's not everything, but at that time we were 30 or 31 with a 2-year-old, and that was a life-changing move for us. So we came up here to Elkhart, took over, like I said, a team that was back-to-back 2-win seasons. I was able to bring Cody French with me, who played for us in Gladwin as well.
I played with Cody in the All-Star game. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, yeah. No, that's awesome.
Cody. Yep.
Cody's, man, he's one of my best friends. So he played for me in Gladwin. He was a senior my first year, so he's a year older than Keegan Smith. Hilarious, because he's like 5 years younger than me. I was his coach. I was 23. He was 18, right? So anyway, so I was able to get him in. So he was our D-line coach in Seymour. He came with me, was our D coordinator. And there's a guy I met who's still here. Trevon Curry has been our defensive coordinator this past year, co-defensive coordinator the whole time, and fell in love with him. And we just absolutely fell in love with coaching the kids in kind of a mixed demographic, and just fell in love with it. I mean, it was like all of one team meeting. I was like, I am going to love it here. This is my jam right here. This is it. And so we won 4 games our first year. And again, that was a group, just those guys are awesome. Those guys are all like turning 22 and 23 now. And it's just awesome connecting with those guys. And We won 6 games our second year, and then we won in the last year before the merger. We tied the school record for wins. We won 9 games, and in the process started having some legit talent, some Division I, FBS level, 4-star D end. We had the number 1 ranked running back in the state in 19. So that was awesome. And then the schools merged, and I knew that was coming, but it was told.
Did they tell you that when you interviewed? Was there like
a
hint of that?
They did, but there was no guarantee. The superintendent at the time, his name's Rob Hayworth. He said, Josh, your track record, 4 years at Gladwin, 4 straight years of incremental wins, 4 years in Seymour, 4 straight years of incremental wins. We're going to have 4 seasons for you to show us that you're the guy. And if your track record continues, we're not really going to have much of a search when this job is there. But if you're not winning in 4 years, you're probably not going to get the job. He was very blunt about it. It was awesome.
Wow.
And honestly, at the time, it became a little bit more, I don't like saying this because it's still about the kids and about coaching, but it became a little bit of a business decision. Like, okay, I mean, financially and my day job, I'm going to be assistant AD, which came with a different territory financially, but there's standards here. And if we're not winning, I will get let go. And in my world as a high school coach with aspirations of only being a high school teacher and coach, I'm like, how many guys get that opportunity to bet on yourself? Like I'm betting on myself, because if we're successful, I'm be the head coach at a school with 3,500 kids in the place that I love, and we're going to be really good. And so I was like, let's do it.
It's 3,500 when it merged.
That's when it merged. Yeah. We're I think officially 3,410. So 3,400.
Way to go home though, which is great.
Central's, both schools had 1,700 kids. I mean, they'd be big, like OK Red type teams. I mean, high level.
There is no school in the state of Michigan above 3,000 enrollment.
No. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying you're talking like, 1,700 kids. I mean, it's been a while, but you're talking, that's bigger than Caledonia. That's bigger than Jensen. That's bigger than most. Almost as big as like a Hudsonville. And we were 2 of them, and they just put them together. So yeah, kind of crazy.
It's like Hudsonville and Granville joining.
Just joining. Yeah. Yeah.
So was Memorial good at football? Was there like an expectation that were they having success? So when you consolidated, was it like there was going to be no hiccup? Like it was going to be, you were just going to hit the ground rolling and still have success?
They had struggled a little bit. They struggled a little bit, and that's tough for me to say, because a lot of those guys are on our staff now, or were on our staff, and those players were on our team. So I don't, they didn't have a ton of wins.
Yeah.
They were competitive, and obviously those players, they had really good players because we coached them, and Division I kid was player of the year in our conference. He's at Grand Valley playing running back right now as a Memorial kid, and Division I receiver at Western Michigan right now as a Memorial kid. So they had kids. And then obviously at Elkhart Central, we had, kid at Penn State right now, and a slew of other kids, kid who had a Central Michigan, who's at Central Michigan as a D tackle, another kid who had a Central Michigan offer. Talking 5, 6, 7 Division I FBS level players that we had in the system at the time. And so we merged, and I was able to fortunately get that job. And then it was COVID at the same time we merged. So that 2020 season was rowdy. So, and we had more talent. We had more talent than we knew what to do with, but we had no off season. Everything was shut down. That was that was the shutdown, where it wasn't restrictions. It was the lockdown, right?
Yep.
No school. So we had no summer. I think they let us do a couple of things in July, and then we started the season, and we have this roster of 60 kids in the program. And we're trying to, stay 6 feet apart and masks and do all that and find a way to lift, and like everybody else was, but we're going through it at like we were talking a different deal transition wise. It's like, go figure, the odds that COVID happens is the year of our merger, like any other figured out a little bit differently, but no, it all hit well. We were undefeated, and we had a couple close calls, but for the most part, we were, I think we finished the year like 3rd in the state in scoring, while having like the 2nd best defensive margin, defensive points allowed. So I think we were 2nd or 3rd maybe in the state in point differential. So we had some it all clicked. It all clicked. And that's just kudos to the kids. Those kids fell in love with each other right away, went from huge rivals to best friends. And we had an elite staff. I mean, Landon Grove's a head coach at West Catholic. He was our passing game coordinator. Trevon Curry, who could very easily be a head coach and I know is in the mix here in Elkhart for my job that I'm leaving. Our co-defensive coordinator. Cody French was our co-defensive coordinator. He is the head coach at Calumet New Tech High School, which is near Chicago. We have a guy, Jonathan Kirkton, elite offensive line coach, was a head coach at a school down the road with like 1,500 kids for 10 years. And like that was our high school staff. And we had some, Ben Kane was a head coach at Hartford in Michigan for a year, I believe. I mean, you're talking like 5 guys who are, head coaches on the same staff. So we had a great year. Lost to a really, really good Merrillville team in the regional, which was like the quarterfinal. And they had a corner at Notre Dame. Their D tackle just signed with Michigan in this class. I mean, another kid at Nebraska, they had elite level talent too, and beat us by 3 in the regional. So that was 2020. And obviously this year we stepped back for the first time kind of in my career. We took a step back and we lost some really, really good coaches. We lost 19 senior starters.
Wow.
The injury bug hit us bad this year, and that's not an excuse. I'm just saying it was a tough combination of things for us this year. We were 5-5, very competitive 5-5, but we're 5-5 nonetheless, but step back. So yeah, that's the 40-minute version. It's kind of crazy reliving some of that stuff. So I know I'm kind of babbling on, but it's bringing a lot of memories back. Wow.
No, we appreciate it. It's very interesting. It's a crazy career.
Love talking football.
Yeah, I'm 36 going on 75.
Yeah, you got like 30 years worth of stories right there.
Crazy. Because I still think of myself as like I'm a young head coach. I'm like, not really. Like it's, crazy.
Well, you're young on paper, but to have been at 5 different schools and in just 16 seasons, 5 different schools is pretty crazy. Yeah. Most coaches don't get started at I don't know, what would you have been when you were at Breckenridge, 20 years old? 19. Yeah. Most coaches aren't getting started that young. Usually they're at least 23, 24, starting as an assistant, working their way up, freshman, JV staffs, things like that, or even middle school coaching. So kudos to you. And that'll kind of get us here to our final topic to wrap things up. The reason we're excited to have a conversation with you, obviously the big announcement coming, I think now 2 weeks ago. I lose track of time here, but I feel like it was 2 weeks ago. East Grand Rapids High School announced Coach Shattuck here as their next head football coach. Want to talk about how that came to be? Obviously, East Grand Rapids High School, a very exciting job for any coach. It's a very nice community, very nice sports facilities, a program that's had a lot of success. One of the most storied football programs in the state of Michigan. I would put it right up there with Muskegon, for that area for, some of the number of state championships they've won. But obviously I would imagine getting back to Michigan was an end goal at some point. Is that probably part of it?
I'm full transparency. It wasn't. Okay. Where if you look at, where we are in Elkhart, where I'm currently sitting here, we're close enough to family that it's, we never thought it would be possible to get back to Michigan. I'm on an admin contract here. I'm working in athletics, so I'm using my degree and we, my wife's got a great job and we're right at the state line. We're, close to Chicago. We've got our Indiana people from being here for 9 years now. We've got our Michigan people just up the road. We did not think we didn't think it'd be possible, from maybe a financial perspective to do that. But things happen really fast. It was their athletic director gave me a call. It was a cold call at East Grand Rapids and left a voicemail. I don't have any service in my office here in Elkhart. So I stepped out of this voicemail from a 616 number I didn't recognize. So I listened to it and, it's Chris Sealstra at, East Grand Rapids. And he said something, your name has come up. I, to this day, do not know how it did or what, sparked them to call me. But kind of the 15-year-old version of me as like a freshman at Spring Lake was like, when East Grand Rapids calls you, like, you probably call back. Probably make that call to call back. And so, it's coaching. It's, people get calls every year and feelers, and, that's just the nature of it. Good athletic directors. I mean, we do that, right? In our athletic department here in Elkhart, if you have an opening, you kind of kick the tires and call people and just kind of say, hey, are you interested? Would you talk? So, I said, I'll have a conversation. And so their athletic director and the principal, Craig Weigel, we had a Zoom just like this, and it became clear, like, holy cow, they're kind of like, it's kind of an interview. I haven't applied, but they're also like, it just had a different tone to it. They were like excited about me before I answered a question, and that felt good, obviously. But I didn't, it's unique because if there's a place, I told my wife after that first kind of conversation, I was like, we always thought this wasn't possible, but like, if there's a place on planet Earth that could do something to get us out of where we are, where we're really happy and everything's really good, it's like, if there's a place that could do it, it's East Grand Rapids, right? I mean, they have resources, it's right in the area where we would love to be. And we just had never talked about it before. And so, I think, Craig, the principal, invited us up on a Sunday and showed us around, and that meant a lot to us. Like, he's taken a day away from his family to show us around. The school system's top notch, obviously, for our own children. And they just really did a good job of, they sold it without, it's East Grand Rapids. You don't really need to sell it, but they did, that for a lot of different things, the community buy-in and what they were looking for in their next coach. And they had done their research on me. So they knew kind of a lot going in, and, it became pretty clear. And then I had a final kind of sit down, and that's when it kind of became like, what do we need to do to make this happen? And I was like, oh, here we go. Like, it was another one of those moments, like when I came to Elkhart, like I'd really, in the back of my mind, is like, this probably isn't just going to logistically work for us. I have 9 years in Indiana. It takes 10 to get vested in retirement. I mean, there's just these other factors, right? That it's not just about the football or about where you live. There's other things. And, they did a great job of presenting something that I'm really excited about with my day job that I find will have a lot of value, that I think I can bring to the district. And then obviously, it's coaching football at East Grand Rapids. It speaks for itself. So it happened fast. It was less than a month ago today, and this process the phone call hadn't even started. So, it was about 11 days between voicemail and sign a contract. So really fast.
So it must have felt pretty nice with them seeking you out. We've talked about it with college coaches signing and pro coaches. You don't really have to interview if you've proved yourself and done that. And it sounds like you kind of got that treatment, which I'm sure felt really good.
Yeah, I still went through the formal process. So it wasn't some backdoor thing where they're like, we'd like you to be our football coach. I think what happened is they wanted to have, these conversations. And I wasn't the only one, believe you me. I understand that there were probably numerous coaches who just weren't interested. A lot of this is luck, right? And we weren't really super interested in moving, but it became clear that this could be something really good for our family. And then, professionally for myself as well. But those first conversations, the phone call, and then the kind of like the Zoom, then it was like, hey, and then going up there and doing a tour, then it was like, okay, and they told me, like, if you want to continue this process, you need to apply, and then we'll go through the formal phase. So there was a lot of mutual interest right away, and that's when I applied. And once you apply, it's like, all's fair in love and war, and applying jobs, like, you go through it and you can't deny that you applied. You are applying. You kind of feel like cheating on your girlfriend or whatever, because you have a great job that you love, and you love the kids, and you're working that job every day. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This was better for myself and my family, better for our kids. And at the end of the day, if I'm putting our players in Elkhart above my wife and our two children, then those are not the priorities that I value. And so it would almost have been irresponsible to say no to what was presented. So I think it's a great fit. It remains to be seen, obviously, but I'm very confident that this is a great fit on both sides. And it's about a lot more than nostalgia and history of EGR. This is a lot about where it is, what I think where my vision for the organizational structure and setup of the program is received, and how much they are in line with that academically and athletically. So I just think it's a great fit. I feel very good about it.
Have you ever been to a game at Pioneer Stadium?
I have not. That's kind of one of the funny things is like, there's a lot of games that as a head coach we miss. And being in Indiana, we start a week before Michigan.
Yep.
And we've been fortunate enough to play a lot of playoff games here because of the way the setup is structured here. So it's just been, I have not seen a game there. I haven't been to a high school game in Michigan and since I coached in one, to be honest with you.
I'm sure you already know, but you've seen it. It's such a beautiful setting to watch a football game. I've probably been to half a dozen games, but you're sitting there on the home side and the sunset and Reed's Lake in the background. You got the Gaslight Village right next door.
Yeah, there's nothing. I haven't seen anything like it. I mean, from a setting, just the whole thing. I mean, you see, cool stadium. There are other cool stadiums, cool press box. There's other cool press boxes. The lake, there's other lakes. You just put them all together. And you're like, it's very unique.
Very cool.
Yep.
So have you had a chance to address your new team yet?
Yeah, last night. So last night was kind of the welcome meeting. This is the difficult part, right? You get, it's kind of like everybody get excited and then I don't work here yet. We went up there and I just think, the biggest thing is, the kids are one thing, but then especially the parents and really the parents of the seniors or of the current juniors, next year seniors, there's a lot of anxiety there when there's a 6-week gap with no leader of the program, because I mean, that's their kid, right? That's their, a lot of those kids have invested and they don't have a direction. So there's a lot of anxiety and I understand that. Well, we're going through it here, right? We don't have a football coach here in Elkhart and there's anxiety from a lot of people. And I mean, I'm anxious for them, right? And I work in the athletic department here. So I think the first thing is to calm their nerves and not calm their nerves by saying, we're going to run the option or we're going to run an odd stack defense or whatever, but calm their nerves by saying that this is what your kids are going to get out of this. This is what we are about. This is our organizational structure. Here's our mission statement. These are our core values. Here's how we hold people accountable to those things. This is our clarity of purpose, and spend a lot of time training them on those things. And then they start to see, okay, I feel a lot better about this. That leads to questions. And then I took, 45 minutes to an hour answering questions based off of that. But, my goal and intent of last night was to get them to leave and say, okay, it's not that they're going to agree with every single thing I said. It's not that they're just going to be like, I'm going to run through a brick wall right now, but then saying, okay, our kids are going to be taken care of. Like there's a plan. That plan is being worked. And in these next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever it is, until I can get up there early June, he's going to be working. Okay. I went over a little bit about looking at what we're looking for in terms of staffing and the types of people and humans that we're going to put in front of the kids to lead them at the positional level and the lower levels. And I think that they want to hear that. There's always that one guy in the crowd who says, you guys going to run the QB or how many tight ends are you going to use? And you try to just kind of brush those questions, because that's not what that night's about. But
no,
you try to get them to leave there with a sense of calm, at least that the kids are going to be taken care of.
I'm glad you're touching on this because
I think we achieved that last night. So,
but I'm glad you touched on that because I feel like that is something that a lot of parents, in a high school athletic, a high school that has athletics that are as storied as East Grand Rapids, or just any program that has a very close following at the high school level. I don't think people understand during a transition between coaches that the coach isn't coming in going, okay, I'm going to get my staff set. I got to get the X's and O's. This is the offense and the defense. No. Like that is like the last thing. That's the last thing. Yeah. People don't seem to understand the culture set. You got to set up that culture first. You're like you said, your core ideas and, values and rules for the program, where are the standards going to be at, because they're students first, right? Student athletes, these are kids that they got to graduate high school and go to college. There's very few of them that are going to continue their career after college. You're first and foremost creating valued young men in the community before you're creating football players. And I think a lot of people miss that.
Well, you're exactly right. And I think that and there's a lot of humility involved in it, because I started out by saying, that you're going to sense this overwhelming level of confidence and conviction in what I'm saying. Please know that all of this has been learned through failure on my own part. We didn't do any of that stuff my first year in Gladwin. Like, what's a core value? What does that mean? I don't know what mission statement. We're not a business. We're a football team. So, you learn that through failure, and you realize, okay, I kind of put it like this. Someone asked me the other day, like, how do you, I think it was through the interview process. In fact, it was with EGR through the interview process. I said, in Breckenridge, I knew I wasn't a head coach. So I knew I loved coaching the game. I wanted to teach and coach. I confirmed that for me. In Gladwin, I knew that I wanted to be a head football coach, and I knew that I loved kids. Like, I loved the relationships. My offensive and defensive right and left hand in 2020, Elkhart High School, Indiana, with 3,500 kids, were two Gladwin kids that played for me. So that puts that in perspective. I knew right away in Gladwin, these are my people. I love this. I love these kids' lifelong relationships, right? But I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I had no clue what I was doing football-wise. No clue at all. Kind of stuck myself to Tony Anese's hip and got into that side of the scheme and the development. And then obviously took my love of and passion for teaching and kids, and kind of that's where some of that came from. So I think by the time I left Gladwin, I was feeling pretty good about being better with the football side, organization, scheme, that sort of thing. And then in Seymour, with what we had, I just learned how to develop football program. I mean, it was from the ground. We started a youth program from scratch. My wife was the president. I mean, it was everything, like K through 12, everything from scratch at a big school. And so felt pretty confident about that. And then again, just full transparency. I didn't mean to be brash about this, but Breckenridge, Michigan, Gladwin, Michigan, Seymour, Indiana, every kid looks the exact same. They look like And so
small town Midwest schools.
Yeah, exactly. And their parents were generally similar backgrounds, all that sort of thing. So coming to Elkhart, I didn't bat an eye. And I'm not saying that as some badge of honor, but that kind of that's just the way I was raised and grew up. And I was excited about teaching and working and coaching in a very diverse school. And so that, to me, in Elkhart, both through Elkhart Central and Elkhart High, because it's not a change of job. I mean, it's a different job, but we didn't move. I mean, it's working in the same school system. We just kind of felt, and Coach Anise said this to me, he's like, once you coach in that demographic, it's a different level of relationship, because those kids need you and they need your staff a different level than what they need you at maybe some of those other places, or like where I'm going right now. And so, they need you at that father figure, that brother figure, at my age, maybe more like an older brother, a crazy uncle, but they need some of those other things. And so I that's what I've really learned, is putting it all together. And then since we merged, I've learned the business organizational structure side, 60 freshman football players, or 55 freshman football players, 110 varsity players, or whatever it is, the management and grades is not like a 30-minute deal anymore, right? That's a Monday job. And so, every place is just kind of added to the experience that I've had. And through failure and self-evaluation, you just try to refine that process. And that's where my confidence level comes here at East Grand Rapids. And, we could jump on this podcast a year from now, and I'll tell you 500 things that I totally screwed up on and we'll learn from for the 2023 season. So, I think that I'm just very grateful for the people who have hired me, and very grateful for all the kids and coaches that I've worked with, that, it's put me into this kind of cocktail of experiences where, I feel that's where my confidence level comes from, is knowing that no matter where you're coaching, what the demographics are, what the socioeconomic status is, there's certain things that are tried and true in every place. And you just we'll try to do that in East Grand Rapids to the best of our ability.
You got me ready to suit up for you.
Yeah. We'll take all the help we can get.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for your time.
I said,
in EGR.
when I'm leaving Elkhart, I said, I am not going to take anything, in the football building. I'm not going to be one of those guys who tries to, yank a walking dummy or something, but I might have about 7 kids with me. So that's going to be tough leaving. I mean, there's some good players here, some really, really good, great kids, great players, but yeah, we're excited.
Tell them to jump in the transfer portal, transfer to East Grand Rapids High School.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's really easy to get in at East Grand Rapids. Easy to buy a house there.
Oh, so easy.
Super.
Yeah, I see the look on your face. That's something you and your wife, I'm sure, got to start trying to figure out too. That's the next step.
Yeah. All good.
Well, that was unless Brett or Kory, you guys have something else to add. I thought that was a pretty solid way to kind of wrap things up here with your last sentiment. Anything else, Brett or Kory? Otherwise, we can kind of wrap things up.
I would just say I'm excited,
Coach.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm excited to see your success out here. Being new to the West Side, being a Mid-Michigan boy, and having some coaching experience. I'm excited to watch you and see what you can do out here.
Yeah, you guys don't be strangers. I'll let you guys know. Reach out, and when we get there, we'll get together and maybe grab dinner or something. That'd be awesome.
Sweet.
West Michigan's better when EGR's on top. They're blue blood.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of work to do, but like I said, I'm excited. We're excited. I've had some staff interactions as much as we can through text and calls and Zooms like this. And there's a great group of people there, the community. This is going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, Coach,
but fun.
I was going to say, watch out, Vince. He might pull me back into coaching. Who knows?
Hey, there you go. Yeah, that's right.
He's getting me itching.
He's over in Belmont, right by Rockford.
Yeah.
So he's not far.
I've been recruited, but I just keep, I don't know.
He's enjoying, after coaching for a few years, he's remembering what it's like to have free time in the fall again.
6 years of coaching on top of my job. I'm a golf fan now. I just,
I hate to blame you. But hey, look, Brett sold you on it. He said, beautiful. I mean, come game.
He's never been to Gaslight Village before.
Yeah, you need to check it out.
I've not.
You need to come on down. What's 15 minutes from Belmont? 20 minutes tops. It's not that far.
Yeah, tops.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It might be your neighbor. Who knows?
Hey, my neighbor's house is for sale right now.
And I might be living in Gladwin with these prices keep going this back in Gladwin commuting.
Yeah, the prices are crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Coach, we appreciate you taking time out of your Tuesday night here to join us to talk about football and your new head coaching job here with East Grand Rapids. Anything else anyone listening or watching, anything you want to add to wrap things up about what we've talked about?
No, I think the last thing I would say, just because you got my mind thinking about it, I mean, anybody who's watching this who played for us in Elkhart and Seymour and Gladwin and Breckenridge, love you guys, man. Those connections are clutch, Anytime there's a new, when the announcement came out, I'm getting texts from guys that played for me in Gladwin and Breckenridge. And it's just, there's nothing better. There's just no greater feeling. And, we like to be stoic as coaches sometimes and think oh yeah, just this is business, blah, blah, blah. It's no, I'm a human being. It feels good to connect with those guys and have those guys be happy for any success that I might have personally. Not even about the football part, but just doing something, having a move that's good for us and our family. And, just reconnecting with those guys and getting back into Michigan where, a lot of our friends and family are. So for anyone who's played for us along this long journey that I spent a lot of time talking about here the last hour, if you're listening out there, appreciate you and love you.
And go Pioneers, right?
That's right, baby.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Hope you enjoyed our conversation there with Coach Shattuck of East Grand Rapids High School. Very excited to see what he does this fall. Looking forward to the Pioneers getting after it in the 2022 season. Good luck, Coach Shattuck and East Grand Rapids High School. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up here with Brett's trivia. I screwed up earlier and didn't let him get his trivia in. He has an NFL trivia question for this week. And then he's also got his recommendation for us. What do you got, Brett?
All right. So for the trivia question of the week, it's an NFL question, but it's kind of a college question too. So with the NFL draft approaching in about a month and Michigan's Aiden Hutchinson projected to potentially be the number one pick in the draft, my question is, who is Michigan's last football player to get drafted number one overall in the NFL draft? And bonus, if you can name the year.
Charles Woodson. I don't know the year.
I don't think he went number one.
I have no idea.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
For a hint here?
Yes.
Have they had a number one draft pick in the 21st century?
Yes.
They have. Okay, that's what I want to know. It was number one overall, you said?
Yeah, number one overall pick.
I know the answer, so I'll let Vince guess and then I'll say it.
I feel like I
5, 4.
Yeah,
Jake
3.
Long, 2001.
I was gonna say
2010 or whatever.
was it?
2008. Jake Long, 2008.
I
I knew
literally
it right when I said it. I was like, I'm an idiot.
literally right as you said that, I'm like, Jake Long crossed my mind. I was thinking offensive lineman. Man.
Yeah. No. Number 1 overall pick, 2008
Wow.
for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I was running through really stud players that they've had, and then I was like, I think it's an offensive lineman, and Long popped up. But all right, Brett, what do you got for a recommendation?
All right, for my recommendation of the week, it is Schmohz Brewery,
Hey,
located on Patterson, just north of 28th Street, the Costco area. I actually went there with Vince when he was here. It was a recommendation from Brass Ring Brewing from the bartender, which Brass Ring was another recommendation of mine. But Schmohz Brewing, it's a very interesting spot when you walk in. It's owned by a couple of Michigan Tech grads. You walk in and it's all like brown panel boards with random Michigan Tech hockey jerseys hanging on. There's like 4 or 5 TVs in there. Like 2 of them are off and some of them are on and fuzzy. But
it looked like a hole in the wall bar in the UP.
It did. That's the vibe. Like the bathroom was probably the most decorated area. The bathroom was very like artistic, and there was a chalkboard in there. I wrote Vince's name on it. But no, Schmohz Brewery, recommend it. The Hop Knocker IPA is the popular beer that they bottle at Schmohz, and that was the beer of choice that day. So Schmohz, recommend it.
All right, you heard it there. I'll have the link for Schmohz Brewing Company in the description.
We want some
Schmohz. I'll have the link for their website in the description of the video and audio versions of this podcast episode. Speaking of which, after you're done listening to this episode, make sure you head over to Twitter, give us a follow at GLSF Ball, BALL. Head over to Instagram, Great Lakes State Football. Give us a follow over there. If you like the video versions of this podcast, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, Great Lakes State Football. Please make sure if you watch the video episodes to throw those suckers a like. Make sure you leave a comment telling us how much you love us. And then on Apple and Spotify podcasts, you can find us, Great Lakes State Football, as well. Make sure you add us to your library so you don't miss an episode when we upload every Wednesday. Thanks for listening to episode 17, Great Lakes State Football. I'm Vince.
I'm Kory.
I'm Brett, and you definitely said Wednesday.
Wednesday. Go Chargers and go green.
Go blue.